Welcome to Maker Connect. This is your host on season two. My name is Steve Schmidt. Today we go all the way to Bombay, India in real time. Abhijit Thakur is with us, and he is globetrotting right now, building business and out talking, negotiating the things that we do in sales. We're going to break down today in terms of negotiation. So if you're on the revenue side, and wondering about, hey, if you're the VP on top of a $55 million company, you're overseeing partnerships, these big 6 and 7 figure deals, and how do those get done? You're absolutely going to want to listen in. So, Abhijit, let's talk about exactly where you're at in the world right now. And then let's run down so everybody knows that like what we're going to be listening to right now is your current role and what you are doing in that role for that $55 million company with Apptad. You guys are out there absolutely kicking ass. I mean, 55 million is a lot of revenue. It doesn't happen overnight. You're in this space too, where if I looked at what you did online, like your background from Pfizer and some FinServ companies puts you in this place today. And so I want to talk about that background too, in terms of like how did your previous 10 years set you up for your success today? So Abhijit, welcome to the show so much. How are you doing?
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having me. Appreciate the time and happy to share the insights and all the background information that I've been gathering over the course of the 25 years of my career so far. And as you rightly said, globetrotting is a smaller sense, based out of Atlanta, currently in Bombay, in India, for some business meetings. But these are interesting times, especially post COVID, when we're seeing this immense push amongst all the IT companies, or irrespective of the company sizes, company domains, company verticals, there's this huge digital transformation push happening across the board. Everyone wants to move away from their legacy softwares, legacy platforms, move over to the cloud, make sense of all the data that they're consuming. And that is where companies like Apptad, which specialize in data management, cloud migration, platform modernization, kind of play a role. So it's exciting times for us, especially
Yeah.
because there is definitely a huge demand of services and
Hmm.
modernization amongst the infrastructure of companies, that the way they see their roadmap going for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And we're trying to play a part, a small part in this entire journey of AI powered digital transformation, is what I call it these days.
Okay, so that's a lot, and I love that you expanded on that. Let me retract and make sense of this for those listeners out there who maybe go, "I have no idea what you just said." If you had, let's say, a nephew came up to you on a holiday and said, "Hey, what do you do again for work?" How would you explain it to them?
My nephews and kids these days are extremely tech savvy and computer savvy, so they exactly know what we do. We kind of always play them down to be coming up the curve, but they're extremely savvy. But however, to answer your question directly, the organizations of the past were monolithic architectures. We've all seen during our growing up days how the green screens and the black screens were dominating the infrastructure. Say, for example, you
Yep.
went to a bank back in the days in 1990s or 2000s or early 2000s. You had to write a checkbook, you had to do everything manually, you had to go to a brick and mortar shop. How many of the millennials or the post millennials these days have ever been to a bank? They've not.
Yeah.
I'm just giving banking as an example. So when I speak to my nephew, I said, how many times have you actually walked into a bank to apply for a open a account, apply for a loan, or to make a transaction? They'll say, I've never been. So what do you do? I say everything to a mobile app. And that's when I tell him that, do you exactly know your mobile app is connected to a huge infrastructure or a data center in the back end, which is
Yeah.
orchestrating and doing a lot of these back end work for you
Yeah.
seamlessly at the speed of light, which takes a lot of IT work, which companies like Aptad and a lot of other companies out there are doing for them. So hopefully he gets the gist of it when I explain to him in this way. And
Yeah, yeah. So like on your phone. Yeah, if you're on your phone or your iPad, that app that you do is going out to the cloud, right? And that cloud is data centers. And I always told my kids, those buildings that are really big and brick and don't have any windows? That's the cloud. And they're like, "What do you mean?" And the data center part of it is that if they pull up Angry Birds, for example, there is a big cloud infrastructure that's hosting that. That is an application that is consumer driven, right? So you're doing business applications. So let's talk about that. What is the most common business application that you support?
Well, I know since the start of our conversation, I've been talking about data, and
Yeah.
people understand data in terms of data as an
Power
asset.
BI, data analytics.
Correct.
Yeah.
However, I'll get back to my nephew. If I'm talking to my nephew, I said
Yeah.
any click or any transaction you make, your any push of a button that you do on your phone is sending a piece of data or a transaction back into the customers, into the company's infrastructure. So can you imagine billions and millions and millions of people using their phones, clicking their iPhones, their Googles, etc., and driving some actionable outcome, which they don't realize what happens at the back end. Every
Yeah.
information or every click is a piece of data. So that's the beauty of data, is what I tell people. So every click that you make, every online click you make on a Facebook or a LinkedIn is sending some piece of information back to the organization to evaluate, analyze, and derive business outcomes from.
That's right.
To manage all that piece of infrastructure and implementation is where companies like us come to support the master data management. The
Yeah.
Because every click at the first hand is unstructured data. You've got to make it structured so that people like us understand and build insights on top of that. And that is analytics, that is Gen AI, that is all the Power BI stuff which happens in the front end. So it's a journey, every from a click, from a push of a button to a click on your laptop to the transaction and the data, going all the way from a jumbled up piece of data in a cloud to getting it organized in columns and structures, and
Yeah.
then sending it via pipes to
Ooh, now
you
you're
know
talking my language. You're giving the data in the way that I can look at it and make sense of it.
absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely. So that's
now
the
we're
key.
talking.
So we
Are you
support a lot of master data initiatives and organization of data in customers data centers.
okay? So how when I think of a big company that a lot of people know about, and then we'll get into negotiation because this is going to be the interesting part because I think data is somewhat commoditized. So let's talk about that because I don't think it should be, and I think it's the tier and the quality of the data on whether or not it's commoditized. Um, is Snowflake a competitor to you?
Not really. Snowflake I call it Snowflake, Google, Azure's are all facilitators, are all infrastructures, wherein cutting edge products by companies which have been developed are being hosted in these or integrated into these cloud environments. So
Yeah,
Snowflake's definitely not a competitor.
got it.
Yeah, it's basically holding a piece of product which would then eventually make sense to all the data. So
I
it's yeah.
understand that now. I'm trying to think of the data stack because a lot of us don't know. Let's just admit it. Like, although I am the CEO of a lean startup, we use cloud applications, but we are not in that business of what you're doing. Big, big, big data lifts, right? So I'm assuming, and this could be a false assumption, that most of your customers are CPG.
Again, I call ourselves industry agnostic, technology
Ah,
agnostic. You could have a manufacturing industry, say, for example, which has locations of suppliers, vendors, customers spread across globally. Now, how do you integrate all those pieces of infrastructure for the CEO of the company sitting in one location, say, for
yeah.
example, in New York, to make sense of what is happening across the globe?
Or India, right? They could be
Or
there and it's
India,
it's
or say, for
8 p.m.
example,
and they're getting
India.
ready to go eat some good food like you, getting out ready to go to the clubs, but they got to look at the dashboard first, right?
Absolutely.
The intuitive
Absolutely.
so you give structure to data so executives can make decisions that are critical to the business.
And yeah, and I just use the manufacturing company as an example. Think about
Totally.
all the e-commerce platforms these days.
Heck
They
yeah.
are Amazon's the biggest example, right? They
Never heard
use
of them.
unless un, unless until they have heavy data management internally, they wouldn't be able to understand and associate the price rise, the price surge, the characteristics of the product. So everything is managed through a data structure or a data model in the back end. That's the reason why they're growing their product database on a day on day basis.
Mhm.
Customers, vendors, all that information jumbled up,
Yep.
prime, everything. So it's a lot of sophisticated infrastructure in the data side, which a lot of
Yeah.
these organizations are using, and that's where companies like us come into play
Yeah.
to create that sophistication.
Let's talk about that then, because okay, you just talked about data. Everybody's obsessed with the idea of data. Very few people know what to do with it, and very few people know how to budget for it. And it's a heavy ROI exercise, correct? It's about,
Absolutely.
call it, missed opportunities, unearthed data, and there's a lot of assumptive data in there. And with AI, I have no doubt that you can do some really cool stuff with showing people the potential. But, and I say but, there's a lot of your competitors doing the same thing. I'm assuming you're bringing more of this methodology that you found the problem and you can solve it versus you're just answering the phone and giving prices. It's probably this journey, I'm assuming, of a long sales cycle. So let's walk through that sales cycle for you. Three things. How long does it take? Well, let's back up. Where are your prospects coming in from where they say, I'd like to learn more, or are you going outbound? Number two, how long does the sales cycle take once they're engaged? And number three, what is the average deal value size if you're comfortable sharing that?
No, absolutely. So I think you touched upon three parts. One is how we do going about our sales organization in terms of prospecting, the deal size, and how we kind of converting those deals in the longer run. So that's so at the crux of it. I've been working with a lot of global companies of late, having a lot of discussions with leadership, and one of the key focal points for the success of any organization comes to evaluating the strength of their sales organization or their sales team.
Yeah.
How big is your sales team? What are the processes they are following? You might have the most fantastic Apple iPhone discovered in the back in your garage or next day, or you can build that up. But unless you know how to take it out to the market, the product would sit in your garage, and then probably someone else might come with it. So having said that, in my sales organization, I don't call it the sales organization, I call it the sales factory. We build a factory model wherein day in and day out, you have to create a process which is executable, which is repeatable, and which is targeted, intent based. We use a lot of these platforms available for lead generation, wherein we have these triggers called intent, a buyer intent, a signal intent, an intent out there in the industry in terms of any significant investment being made by an organization in a particular area. That's the way how we kind of seem break down and segment our leads, which go out to our sales reps, etc. And then we break down our sales organization into two parts. I call it the marketing sales, and second part is the consultative sales. Why? What is the difference between these two? For marketing sales, I call it a process wherein you're blasting out 10,000 emails every month. It's serving the brand awareness purpose. It's serving a marketing outreach perspective. And thirdly, it gives you a certain idea of what has been your open rate and your response rate amongst the marketing outreach that you're doing, because that generally drives in organic traffic to your websites, and through your contact us forms you get some vital information coming
It's a
out.
lot of
So
data, right?
that is
A lot of
extremely
good data.
a lot of good data again. And the second method, which is the more evolved method of selling, is where you have some of your more seasoned tech players who do a lot of consultative selling, is what I call it. They evaluate the company, they understand the problem, and they tailor the solution to a technology sales kind of a perspective, more tailored to that particular organization. So those emails, those outreaches are much fewer than those 10,000 blasts that we done. But both need to go hand in hand, as per me.
Do you use the account-based approach on your enterprise strategy?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So both, I guess, the balance between the two is extremely important. Both cannot run. You just can't survive just on consultative selling. You need both to work together. And
Yeah.
then from our perspective, our average sales cycle is what I call it, 6 to 8 months, because
Yeah.
our deal sizes are typically half a million to go all the way till $5 million.
Yeah.
If you've got to do an entire data architecture or data strategy evaluation for a company, because it's a big investment, as you rightly said in the start of the conversation, right? It
Yeah.
it is done one time and is only replugged and redone probably in the next 5 to 7 years. So it's not something that people take so casually while you're working with a service provider who's
Yeah.
consulting and suggesting you something. So Yeah, 6 to 8 months. And during the process of 6 to 8 months, it's not just direct selling or direct conversation. It's a
Yeah.
lot about education as well. It's a lot about, I call it the indirect selling way, where
Yeah.
you're constantly educating the person or the CIO or the CTO of a company about the new trends in the industry, what's
Yeah.
happening, what other CIOs are doing, why is one technology better than the rest.
Yeah.
So that builds kind of a relationship uh, for us to take forward to eventually, hopefully, getting that sale.
Let's start right there. Okay, let's get into the negotiation part. This is gonna be fun. You said the magic word relationship. A lot of people know in sales, you get that. You get that feeling, right? You go, okay, here we go. Like they're giving me information. I'm exchanging emails. There's some trust established. There's some NDAs that are signed. Salespeople are now putting in an opportunity. They're forecasting it, whatever that dollar amount is, which is extremely critical to your organization. Walk me through that process of how do you establish and benchmark price? When do you deliver it? And then when your pricing strategy is there, how are you going about the realization that they're going to negotiate with you? And a good example of that might be, oh, we're going to come in at 95% of our normal rate. We can take a deal at 85%. I'm not revealing any industry secrets here. I mean, everybody's negotiating. Um, through your cycle, when do you deliver the actual price? Because if I'm 6 to 8 months in a cycle, if I'm delivering that month two, that is going to change and morph multiple times over 6 months. So walk me through that.
So this actually is an extremely complex situation when you're dealing with high level folks. Everyone knows the price points of every other competitor these days in the market. So
Yeah.
it's not that something you're pulling out rabbit out of the hat. Like, hey, wow, you're like extremely low priced than
Yeah.
the others. There's a standard set in the market for sure. There are the premium players out there in the market who operate at a certain level. Everyone's aware of that. That's the premium players out there in the market, like an Accenture or a Capgemini or some of the more seasoned tech companies. Then there come the tier two companies like Apptad, which are more boutique in nature, is what I would call it. We specialize in a certain domain and just not do everything altogether. So the advantage or the relationship that we build during the entire sales cycle while negotiating with a CEO or a CIO or someone in procurement is to create a value proposition, especially from a boutique company standpoint, flexible engagement models. A lot of times when you're working with an organization, they appreciate the fact that you're willing to work not as a not as a vendor or a service provider, but as a partner to this overall potential deal that is being worked on. They also respect a lot of value when there's certain investment which the partner makes or the service provider makes to fulfilling the overall objective of the company that you're working with. So in our particular case, I mean, I can speak from my personal experience. There have been one couple of big deals wherein we have offered our investment resources or our subject matter experience folks to guide them throughout the process at no cost to the company. So these are some of the small tweaks that you add while building out a proposal, which kind of stands out that the partner is also going one step along with them to ensure that the overall value is delivered. Of course, there's always haggling on the prices at the end of the day, which is fair enough. But everyone understands there is a certain margin which needs to be made. Baseline being around 20 to 25% at the least on every proposal that is made. That's a fair ask in this industry, in the services space altogether. It's a niche market. The demand and supply of high-end technology resources I mean, they know if a company if a company is doing all this initiative themselves, they know what would it take to hire a person who's a top-end architect as
Yeah.
against outsourcing that work out for the long run. So everyone, as I said, everyone's pretty much aware of the consequences of the cost benefit analysis, and that
Yeah.
kind of gives them an overall take in the overall negotiation cycle. But yeah, it's not as complex as it used to be once you add all these different variants into your overall statement of work, time or material, or probably a fixed price engagement that you do. You are definitely evaluated with a couple of other vendors and their
Hmm.
price points, and it's a fair ask end of the day between how you
Yeah.
want to take it forward.
we're going to get into the fun part of this now. So there's three questions where we lighten it up. Um, Movies. I know growing up, I would watch movies, and there's hostage negotiations, right? We've all heard of Chris Voss, and he wrote a great book, and the salespeople's all freaked out. None of them actually listened. Like they listened to it, but they didn't apply the advice. At least that was my observation, because negotiation is this very delicate thing. And in the movies, it makes it look very hostile. In real life, though, it's not so much like that. Walk me through what your opinion is of the difference between negotiation in the movies and what it's like in real life.
Well, that's an interesting take. I mean, I've always been, since you've spoken about movies, one of my favorite movies has always been Jerry Maguire. Show me
Ah,
the
yeah.
money, show
Yeah.
me the
Show me
money,
the money.
and show me the money. And I mean, that's actually the he is the epitome of the perfect sales guy. I mean,
Yeah.
come to think about it, leaving a high cushy job and getting onto the road with one client and making his business grow from there. So that
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot to learn from there. However, coming back to the basics, it's definitely more fictionalized and more Hollywoodish when we call the overall negotiation part there. They're not as hard nosed because when you're dealing with technology folks, they're much more nuanced in their approach. Especially they understand when a person is just faffing or probably just doesn't know his subject, and they appreciate the fact when you show some past case studies of the work that you've done in the past for similar use cases.
Yeah.
And one you have the inherent knowledge and inherent that like to like one-to-one discussion going with them purely from a technology standpoint, they appreciate honesty, transparency, and being upfront in terms of what you're trying to give them and what's available out there in the market. So
Yeah.
that's one thing which I think, three things which I've always noticed which clients ask is, have you handled a similar engagement in the past?
Yeah.
Can you show me some use cases, case studies? And then can you share me some proof points in terms of customer testimonials and past experiences? So they want to evaluate your work,
Yep.
your relationship with your existing clients, so that in a nutshell, you're one of the trustable guys to work with or an organization to work
Yeah. Trust it. I mean, it's so interesting. We've done 33 of these podcasts, and our editing team went back and, with AI tech now, you can see the words that are said the most very easily. And the word trust was said over 942 times. And the next word was negotiate, which was said less than 300 times. And so I said, well, really, we're talking about trust. And the human side to this is very much based on a trust when you meet somebody. And I view it as a very short window of time to establish that. At least I view that if I'm getting on a Zoom call with you, number one, I better be on time. Number two, I better have done my work. Number three, I better understand what my value is because I need to uphold it to you. Walk me through, how do you teach your team that? Because I think it's one of the more overlooked things when we talk about sales training. Like they come in, they get the playbook, they get their logins, but nobody's walking them down the hall and saying, now here's 3 days on how we negotiate. Here's how we do this. Some organizations do that. Maybe you do it yourself. What is your philosophy? And then how do you vet that internally to get your team to subscribe to that? Because otherwise, it's just you negotiating every deal. And for a $55 million company, that's a lot of you doing a lot of work. So walk me through that, because I think a lot of people in your place struggle with that.
No, absolutely. I think that's one of the key challenges because no one person can do it all. You
Yeah.
have to rely on your sales organization to fulfill their part of the things for you as the leader to get the right intel, the right meetings on the calendar, and the right atmosphere for us to take things forward. I built my sales organization about, say, for example, in Apptad about 2 years back, right from scratch, hiring all sorts of hunter skills is what we call it. The ones who are hunters, the ones who are analysts who give you the intel, who feed you the right information, and the ones and some of the ones who are just straightforward. I call them the sales admin kind of guys, who create the content, the collateral, etc. So it's a mixture of all these three. One thing which I've noticed extremely, not only in sales but in general, my philosophy has always been is avoid micromanagement. Number one, you cannot you cannot micromanage a person unless until you know they feel that empowerment themselves. So micromanagement is totally off the radar for me, especially with sales guys. They're mavericks. I call them the mavericks. They're not the usual guys or the usual mindset guys who want to come and just log in for 9 hours a day and go home. That's not the work. My philosophy has been, get me one meeting, one deal in 3 months. You can take the next 2 months off. That's the kind of high level philosophy which I teach them, so they understand that point. And hopefully, I mean, I'm not saying that everyone's still got a lot of work to do,
Yeah.
but that's the kind of general mindset that I try to build out in my teams.
Hmm.
And then second misconception, or I would call it the way the industry perceives salespeople, are they're the ones who are always going to be extremely just the talkative ones, set up meetings and pass on all the hard work to be done by the solution architects or the
Yeah.
brains of the company. I think those days have gone.
Yeah.
It's the sales teams these days have to be knowledgeable enough
Amen.
to at least I'm not saying they've got to be coders or data analysts themselves, but they need to have sufficient knowledge from an enablement process or an industry ecosystem perspective to at least hold their fort in a conversation with the client with the first time when they're speaking to them for at least 35 to 40 minutes. That's extremely vital for them. And to get to that certain level, to hold that conversation, engaging conversation, salesy as well as technology, is where I try to build my teams to do a lot of technology adoption internally. I mean, I'm not talking about hardcore trainings, but be an expert in the product that you're trying to sell. Go through some certifications, go through some sales modules. I mean, every product that we sell have partner portals available, which have a wealth of information and resources from a sales enablement perspective, competitor analysis, loss win ratio, deal cycle, how to handle rebuttals. So as long as you're equipped with all that information, I think you the salespeople should be in a good position. So you have to keep growing them individually as well, and not just be focused on how many meetings did you get, how many emails did you send, how many calls did you make, which all just then kind of takes its toll over the course of time. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of my philosophy with my team at least.
Yeah. Very holistic. And I think it's what I've heard a lot when I talk to leaders. It's part of why they hired you, right? It's you're coming in. And if I'm the CEO of a $55 million company, I certainly am not going to hire somebody that I don't think can negotiate big volume deals. Uh, a CEO is certainly not going to want to micromanage you. They're going to want to get the data, like you said. It sounds like you've really taken the time to set that up with intent. So, from one sales leader to another, kudos to you because that passes the sniff test big time. I want to bring it back to the negotiation question one more time because I think a lot of people can benefit from this answer. So this is again, this podcast is about getting people to listen to this and saying, I've never thought of it that way before. Walk me through first round of negotiations. Let's say the deal value is a 500,000 and they come back and they say, you know what, this is all great. Da 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 da. What we only want to pay 400 grand for it. There's a lot of things your sales team can do, right? A lot of earlier sales folks would say, we got to do that. We got to do that to win the deal. Other people would say, you know what? There's about 20 other things we can do before that. I'll give the three that I come up with the most often, which is deal term, payment structure. Can we do a net 30 and net 60? Can we split it up into two payments? Number three, do we need to go back and loop all the way to the beginning and resurface pain? So those are like three tactics that I go to. And quite frankly, in transparency, I think the Maker Group was the first one where I went through that training where I was like, oh my gosh, I thought I did understand this. And I really didn't understand any of it. But for you, that is inherent to the results. That is the money that crosses the line. That is the shareholders in the company looking at you and doing that. So, what are the three things that your team's going to do when that happens? And what do you do to teach that?
No, fair enough. I think this is a fairly common ask in every deal that we work with. As you rightly said, if it's a $500,000 deal, I mean, how did we reach that number?
Yeah.
Especially in the services space, there's a lot of wiggle room for us to kind of
Yeah.
work on the deals since it's not a product. If it's a
Yeah.
product based company, then you have, this is a product, so many subscribers, so many users, so many volumes of data. They have everything listed out in terms of their rate card or the rate sheet.
Yeah.
Now, when you come to a service provider like us, we typically operate in the in terms of the total hours estimated for a particular project.
Yeah.
That's that's typically the rate, right? Hey, is it going to take 10,000 hours to accomplish this particular project, or is it going to take 1,000 hours to accomplish this project? That's the kind of estimations that our teams typically do, factoring 30%, 20% overheads and certain project uncertainties which are already built in as part of the thing. So the typical model of proposing a price structure is the total number of hours estimated internally for a particular project multiplied by the average dollar value for the resources that would be involved in it. Now, for example, we've got a 10,000 hour migration project. You might have five extremely high-end technical architects, cloud architects, whereas there might be three or four quality analysts to monitor the data and automate the data. Now, the average pricing between an architect who might be at a $300 per hour rate as against a quality guy who might be a $100 an hour rate, there's a big wiggle room for us to play around with. So these are a couple of areas that primarily fall upon us from a negotiation standpoint to have some wiggle room around that. The second key one, which we eventually then propose to clients, is you want a blended model of operating and delivering this overall project. If you want everyone to be on site, of course, there's a fairly high amount of price point for them. You want half of them to be offshore or near shore. The
Yeah.
cost goes down by one third
Yeah.
overall from a project standpoint. So that was number two for me. And
Yeah.
number three is, of course, the payment structure.
Yeah.
A lot of times people don't want to evaluate or give off their entire budget upfront, so we make our payments milestone based.
There you go.
We accomplished this entire 10,000 hour project, the first big milestone or use case, which is a tangible outcome delivered on the timelines committed by the service provider. They're just going to jump off the seats and be ready to pay you the next amounts upfront. So it's again trust, building trust, ensuring you're covering your you're covering your positions in terms of what you've committed, delivered based on commitments, and then of course payments flows through. So but yeah, these are the three different areas which I always try to wiggle around with while negotiating, while dealing with the clients. And as I said, they're not pretty new strategies, but if you play them right, even the basic stuff, it kind of works to your advantage.
Yeah. It's a lot to be said there. And we come back to trust. We come back to basics. That you didn't cite some negotiation mastery book. There's nothing on the shelf that somebody can read that's gonna to get them to unearth the secret. To your point, it sounds like it's a lot of core human trust aspects, doing the due diligence of doing the work you say you'll do, and then they trust you, and then you hit milestones, and they pay you, and that's this real unique concept, right? And I think a lot of us lose track of that there are a lot of companies out there that are delivering the kind of value that is driving other companies versus we're going to buy this software solution and we hope there's an ROI to it. Those are the kind of purchases that in this economy are getting slashed left and right. And obviously, it doesn't sound like you are one of those. So kudos to you and your organization for driving that forward. Let's end the podcast with this one thing. What is the one piece of advice that you wish you would have gotten on negotiation earlier that you would give to somebody right now listening that you think could change the trajectory of their career?
One piece of advice which I would have got was sales is not about just being a smart aleck trying to be brash, trying to be arrogant. It's all about working, keeping the client's hats on, working with them in terms of technology, being calm, being patient. The aggressive profile, as you said, Hollywood profile of a sales guy is a guy who parties too much, a guy who is extremely brash, arrogant, and is just trying to kind of blitzkrieg his way through deals and stuff. It's
Yeah.
all a lot about patience. It's a lot about being calm and being educated. So I guess if I would have imbibed a lot of these skills much earlier on, I probably might have yeah benefited better, I would
You've
say.
been wildly successful. And I think a lot of us say that, but yet you have been wildly successful. And I say that to a lot of the people on this show. I mean, a lot of people listening out there would love to be in your seat. And a lot of people forget that it's just executing the basics consistently over time versus coming in with this big blitzkrieg strategy or a secret. And I think we all want to think it's that, right? Because then it seems harder to reach. or when we do it, we've done something so great. But to your point, it really is about doing the same things and implementing behaviors that are consistent over time. And that's the thing where people go, well, that's it. And you go, yeah, that's it. But it's under pressure. If you're not doing it right, and to your point, if you don't have those three things that you know that your sales team can do and you panic, and it's the end of a quarter and the board's on you, and you don't have that next play, that could cost the company 6 figures, 7 figures over the renewal life. And so I love drilling in on that because I think it gives everybody a chance to reflect like, did I do that today? Did I really structure my business that way? So, Abhijit, thank you so much for sharing that. And I know you got a dinner and some things to go to. So, thank you so much for your time. Last thing, where can people find you? And obviously, where can they do business with you? So, those of you who are still listening um, are going to want to contact you. That's why they're still here. So, let them know where they can find you.
Well, they can definitely find me in Atlanta. Number one, that's where I'm from. I'm there definitely on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll find me on LinkedIn as well. And Apptad.com, Apptadinc.com is where most of our core wealth of information is there. So if anyone wants to learn not only sales, happy to chat, happy to share some information about what's happening and collaborate from there.
Thank,
Absolutely.
thank you so much. This is 40 minutes of time that I really enjoyed. I learned. It always gives me a chance to hone in my own call it negotiation game. We have gotten so good at forecasting because of some of this stuff that we did that's this morning, and I think understanding the mechanics, like you explained, is going to make this a lot easier for everybody when they start to understand that. At the end of the day, you just got to have fun with it, right? I mean, it sounds so serious when we talk about negotiation, but at the end of the day, if you're not having fun with it and the customer's not having fun, they're probably not going to do business with you anyways. So if the energy is hitting that crescendo and you know it's there, lock in the price. Um, go back and rewind to the three things Abhijit shared with you today. MakerConnect.com. You can find all that. Us on YouTube. 33 other leaders in building. Our goal is to get to 500 within 3 years that are all sharing advice from around the globe. Thank you so much, Abhijit. Your face and your voice will be heard as a part of that. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Steve. I really enjoyed the conversation.
All
Thank you.
right.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Maker Connect.